Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Mintle. Hey, thanks for listening to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. Faith radio podcasts are only possible because of your support. Thanks for giving and for sharing with a friend.
Doing life together, reaching out with hope, encouraging one another, each step along the road. You and I can make everything a little better, doing life together.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. I'm your host, Dr. Linda Mintle, the relationship doctor, and I'm here along with my co-host, the other Dr. Mintle, my husband, Norm. And every weekend, we're here, we're doing life together, and we're here with you if you want us to be any day of the week, correct?
Right.
I need to maybe say that because
Right.
of podcasting, and you can listen anytime.
Right.
But we're so glad you've joined us.
Yes, indeed we have. Take us along on a jog or on a trip or
Right.
whatever you do. We're happy to go with you.
Yeah, we're actually scheduled on the weekend, but you can listen to it anytime.
Anytime.
Right.
So in that vein, I'm going to ask you an anytime question. Have you ever been in a relationship with a person who expresses feelings indirectly instead of directly? Today's show is all about this relationship behavior that we've all encountered, and psychologists call it passive-aggressive behavior.
Yeah, I have to admit, Norm, this is a behavior that I really dislike.
Oh, it's at the top,
It's
top
both of us.
2 or 3 on the list,
That's
right?
because you and I are very direct
Yes.
when we're dealing with problems. But if someone has a problem, that's what I'm saying. Deal with me directly.
Right.
I don't like this passive aggressive behavior. I don't like the undercover manipulations that are part of it. Someone smiling to my face and then saying or doing something negative to me behind my back. I really try to avoid relationships like this.
Right, because what happens is when people behave that way to you, you don't trust them.
That's right.
It causes all sorts of problems, and you see this disconnect between what they're saying and what they're doing. And when you see that, you're like, well, I can't trust this person.
That's exactly right. And the New York University Medical Center defines a passive-aggressive individual as someone who, and this is their definition, may appear to comply or act appropriately, but actually behaves negatively and passively resists.
That's good.
So passive-aggressive actions can be mild. They can, like making excuses for not getting together, to the very serious, such as sabotaging someone's well-being and success.
Wow.
So passive-aggressive people look like they're cooperating with you, but really they're manipulating the situation and they're hiding their aggression. So they have a type of what you might call sort of a sugar-coated hostility.
Wow. I think this is a good example. Tell me if I'm right. Someone gives you the silent treatment, or they're pouting or whining, or they accidentally forgot something they were supposed to do because they were actually angry and didn't want to do it.
Yeah, all of those are passive-aggressive. The person is angry or upset, but they deal with that in a passive or what we might say covert way, right? So behind the counter, sort of.
Pretending to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're calculating, though, some underhanded means to get what they want by manipulating you while hiding their anger. So that's what makes it so difficult. On the surface, then, they appear cooperative, but you're really being manipulated. And this is often used when a person hates to lose, doesn't like to be wrong, or they just absolutely have to be right.
Yeah, you're just adding to the list of things we don't like. Okay, so this isn't a positive way to communicate.
No.
Why do people do this? What leads them to it?
Okay, so yeah, I looked into this a little bit because it is something that is not real effective in relationships because eventually people get pretty upset with you.
Right.
So there's an underlying fear and avoidance of direct conflict. That's sort of at the root of this. Then there's a feeling of being powerless, maybe helpless, and the result is some type of unspoken power struggle during the conflict. So you mentioned the silent treatment.
Right.
That's a really good example. So there's like this fear and avoidance of conflict. So you don't want to really talk about it.
Okay.
Someone can just withhold their intimacy. It's another way it can express itself. Maybe praise. They don't give you praise. They're critical. There's a lot of sabotage. That's a behavior you can sort of recognize.
Right.
And then one of them is maybe they're constantly running late.
On purpose.
Yeah, on purpose. And then the classic one is they just don't do what they're being asked to do.
Wow. Yep, that sums it up. So is this come from your family? Do you learn it? Is it genetic? How does this happen?
It does have something to do with how people grow up. So there's a California therapist, Andrea Brandt, who wrote a book about this topic. She actually, a whole book on this. And she had 8 keys to eliminate passive-aggressive behavior. So here's what she says. She says that people who grew up in a family where the one parent is dominant, the other is subservient, they may be more likely to engage in passive-aggressive behavior. And here's a quote from her. They learn that powerful and volatile people cannot be approached directly, but it's okay to lie to them, keep secrets to get what you want. So, for example, we've all heard this. We won't tell your father. But that's actually passive-aggressive behavior. Yeah. So maybe the parents are stressed. Maybe they teach that it's impolite to disagree. But whatever the reason is for this, Norm, children learn to submerge their true feelings, their thoughts, and needs in order to cope and to actually get people's approval.
Okay, that makes sense. So what do we look for? You've mentioned some tactics that could be used, but help us spot someone who's trying to manipulate us through these passive-aggressive ways.
Well, here's a few. So do you see resentment and opposition to the demands of others, especially to people who are in authority? Do you see people resisting cooperation? They tend to procrastinate, and they make intentional mistakes in responses to the demands of others? Or do you see someone with a cynical or hostile attitude?
So they're more aggressive on the passive-aggressive.
On the passive-aggressive, right. More of the aggression rather than, but there's some passiveness to it.
Yeah.
Or do you see someone make frequent complaints about feeling unappreciated or cheated in life?
That victimization thing.
That you mentioned, yeah.
So what is the point of being manipulative and indirect?
Really just to avoid confrontation, but have the upper hand in the process. Oh. So when someone is passive-aggressive, they try to make you question your judgment by playing dumb or forgetting. And you think, wait, maybe I misread the situation, but you actually didn't. And the person is trying to manipulate you and make you question your sanity. So the intent is to get you upset and off guard so they can stay in control.
It sounds like gaslighting. Are they the same?
It has a little bit of that effect to it, yeah. They're very similar, a little bit different, but yeah.
So when there is a conflict, they won't give you a straight answer. Or they might change the subject when they're trying to get away from the problem.
Yeah, that's a diversion and evasion tactic. Sounds very military when I say that, doesn't it? What happens is they're moving the focus off of their part of the problem, and they're trying to blame it on you or someone else. And when you get close to the truth or what really happened, they just divert the conversation. And they are good at this. They get you off on another topic. This actually happened the other day. I was trying to address a specific conflict with someone, and the person just kept evading it and trying to change the subject. And that person is known as someone who's passive-aggressive.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Goodness. So what happens when someone just flat out lies to you? I mean, they're not, it's obvious, or they don't tell you the whole story, or they distort the story and fabricate.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot, and it's twisting the truth and part of that passive-aggressive behavior. For example, you might see this in a person who, let's say, would take credit for things that they really didn't do, or pretend they were somehow involved. Or they say one thing to you and another thing to someone else. They can be vague when they're answering direct questions, or they change the story to work towards their advantage. So the bottom line is they're actually twisting the truth to manipulate it.
But would they recognize that and think, oh, I'm lying now?
Not really. Once it becomes a pattern in someone's life, they're often unaware and have distorted the truth so many times to get what they want, they might not really see that.
And there are some people I think we know, like, who might be passive-aggressive, who are charming when they lie and they manipulate. They use flattery and humor, and they work their way out of the situation through charm, and that's still passive-aggressive.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, it also sounds narcissistic too.
It does,
doesn't it?
It does.
And this is important. If you somehow corner them, they might get very angry. I mean, that's the aggression part of this, right? Especially if they can't work out they can't work it out. They can't get out of the lie. Then what they do is they intimidate you to put you on the defense.
Wow. And then do they sometimes also play the victim? so that you feel sympathy toward them. And that sounds like a distraction again to me. You're trying to confront a problem they created, but somehow now they're
the victim. Yeah. And then later you realize it and you go, wait
a minute.
They made excuses for their behavior. They blame me or other people.
Yeah. So this is a real big relationship problem. I think a lot of people and couples probably need to avoid.
You could try to do that, but I think it's a good idea if you know someone is passive aggressive, not to choose that person as a friend, particularly because you know you're going to have a lot of problems with that. But you can't always do that because there are people in your life. What if they're in your family?
Yeah, right.
What if they're your coworker and you have to work with them? That's where I've actually encountered the most of this is in the workplace. When people are kind of envious of people getting a promotion or a job, or they want to look important, and so they kind of twist the truth and lie and act as if they did stuff they didn't do. All of that is a part of why we see this maybe more so in the workplace.
Well, and that's probably why we don't like it so much. I mean, it ranks at the top of our list of behavioral traits that we don't like.
Yeah, or not fair.
Because, there you go. You and your fairness
I know. It's like,
Dr.
and then
Linda has a fairness gene.
I
folks.
do. And then, you see this sometimes in people in the church.
Right.
We have been in churches where this has been a problem, and it creates a lot of issues in small groups and interpersonal dynamics with other people. So you can't always avoid it. That's why it's not really realistic to say, I'm just never going to deal with somebody who's passive aggressive. But that's why we're doing this show, so we can give some ways of handling this.
Well, we're going to learn more after this break. And when we return, how do we deal with passive-aggressive people successfully? We'll be right back.
Is every spare minute of your life filled with some activity, event, or demand? If so, you could be suffering from a very common American disease. It's called overcommitment, and it has seeped into every area of our lives. I'm Dr. Linda, the relationship doctor, and yes, I'll admit it, I've fallen prey to overcommitment in my life just like I imagine you have. Saying no occasionally is the best defense against overcommitment. But if it's too late and you're already overcommitted, here's a little tip to help you make it through. In the busiest days, you can still stop and take 5 just for yourself. When your heart is racing and your thoughts are whirling inside your head, your effectiveness just plummets. But if you'll pause right in the middle of all the hubbub, maybe close your eyes, breathe deeply, and remind yourself that the current task will be completed, you'll feel an immediate sense of relief. Then you can head back into the job at hand with renewed focus and energy. And when the next chance comes to overcommit, it comes your way, you can work on your priorities by just saying, hey, no.
Hi, welcome back to the Dr. Linda Mental Show. I would love to take this moment to remind you that you can follow Dr. Linda on her social media platforms, X and Instagram, at Dr. Linda Mental, and on Facebook you can find her at Dr. Linda Mental, author and speaker. And of course, we love for you to listen to our podcast on myfaithradio.com or whichever is your favorite podcast platform. We are everywhere. Just search Dr. Linda Mental Podcast and she'll come right up. Or you can go to myfaithradio.com. And the book that Dr. Linda wrote that I think is appropriate to our topic today, We Need to Talk, is going to help. What do you think?
Yeah, and there's a chapter in that book that is written about how to have conflict with difficult people. So very specific strategies, whether it's someone with this passive-aggressive behavior, someone who's narcissistic, someone who is... there's a whole list in there of the personality type of disorders that people have to deal with. So, yeah, that book could really help.
That's very helpful. All right. So we talked about early in the program that you and I like direct communication. It just seems to me that I would very much like to go to someone and say, hi, you're being passive aggressive right now. Would that help? Oh.
Probably not. Not would help at all. They probably just get more defensive if you did that, right? That's
And
not
then
gonna,
they're a victim. Oh,
yeah,
you're good.
yeah, and then they'll act passively aggressive with you. So no, probably wouldn't help too much. But and it has to do with, Norm, people have to want to change. They must know how their behavior is affecting others. They have to want it to be different. So there has to be some recognition at the beginning that, wait, my way of dealing with people is not working very well.
But how do they know that if someone
Well,
doesn't point it out?
You could say that was really indirect, or it would be really helpful if you came up to me and you were more direct about what you want. Don't go behind my back. That doesn't seem to work. It just makes me upset. So without calling them passive aggressive, you can point out their behaviors. And one of the things you can say to them is, I can't really trust you. I mean, you mentioned trust early on in the program, and that's a big part of that. But one of the issues when you're dealing with somebody who's passive aggressive is you just can't allow that resentment to build up. And that's hard to do,
Yes.
because when I find out that someone has done something behind my back, I sort of want them to pay
Right.
for that, which is not a godly response. And we're trying to give godly responses in our shows, right? Rather than just flying off in the natural. So I don't think it would help to say, hey, you're passive aggressive, but I do think it would help to point out some of the behaviors you've seen that are not helpful in your relationship.
Okay. Might need some coaching on that, please. Okay, so here's another scenario. You recognize someone as passive aggressive. Okay, I think you're helping us know what that looks like. What is a good first step to deal with that person specifically now?
Well, it does kind of relate to what we were just talking about. So if you can confront calmly with facts. So it doesn't do you any good to talk about your feelings, because someone's just going to get more upset. So you just calmly with facts, because the person is going to be really good at manipulating you. So you have to stay on the facts. Know ahead of time what you want from the person. Be prepared for them to get angry, because they're going to feel like they're losing the conflict or they're getting called out.
They kind of look at it as a contest, maybe?
Yeah, they're going to feel like they've been called out.
Yeah,
So you don't want to do that. So just stay on the facts. Become a little bit of a broken record with the facts, and try not to get real emotional. And, if you can have someone with you who can provide a reality check and give you some emotional support for doing that, that can be helpful, because arguing is not going to work. And if you start getting more argumentative and escalating your anger, it's just going to escalate everything.
But if you bring someone with you, won't they feel like you're ganging up on them?
They might, but it's a biblical concept
It is.
to bring someone with you if you need to, and we'll talk about that way that you do that from the Bible in a little bit.
What about a strategy of using humor? You and I have a friend who uses humor to deflect things all the time.
A lot.
Too much.
Sometimes I've wondered if that's passive aggressive, because it's so much of humor using it. But humor does diffuse conflict. And it breaks the ice. And sometimes when you do that, it can take down the emotion so the person can actually talk better to you or more honestly.
Okay, but if they don't and they start making up excuses after excuse, then what do I do?
If you start accepting those excuses, you're going to be getting more and more of this behavior
just
thrown
feeds
at
it,
you.
right?
Yes, It's going to feed that. So I would rather listen, focus on their actions, don't get into their intentions or excuses. Don't just ignore that. Judge the behavior. So look at the character of the person and the way he or she takes responsibility or blames other people. So look at that. Be polite, be firm. Don't allow them to wiggle out of direct answers. Best way to do it would just be to ask for a yes or no. I was watching this on a political interview the other day. I was somebody in Congress that was interviewing somebody on some topic. I think it was on transgenderism.
Oh.
And they were it was on women's sports.
Oh,
And, the whole idea related that
Sure.
men can play women's sports if they've made a transition. And the person just kept not answering the question, not giving an answer. And the interviewer just kept saying, I just want a yes or no answer. Is there a difference when biological men play women's sports?
and then they had all this.
It went around like 5 times, and he kept going back to, I just want a difference. And the person never answered. And the interviewer finally said, well, here's some statistics that the top first person in some kind of running, 2,500 males had beaten that score.
Wow.
So he's trying to make a point because the person just would not answer the question. That's passive aggressive.
Okay, but in real life,
Yeah.
not on the media, what if they won't give you a yes
Yeah.
or no?
You can stay on point and be a good interviewer, but that's part of it. But part of it is that you do need to stay with it and just go back to the facts and say, not quite like that interviewer did, but
Right.
But, I'm just asking you a question. I still don't think I've heard a yes or no for that question. Are you saying yes? Are you saying no?
Yeah.
I think you can do it
Which is
nicely.
it? Right.
Yeah, but it's kind of the same process.
So it's kind of dogged determination.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've said that passive-aggressive people are probably that way because they want or need something.
Mm-hmm.
If they're not getting it, then they try to make you feel bad. How do we deal with them trying to make us feel bad? And I know you're going to say nobody can make
I
you
know,
feel.
that's it, right? You can't. So keep that in mind. Just look at what they're doing, but they cannot make you feel bad if you choose not to accept that feeling. That is such an important issue in therapy. We talk about it all the time. That person can do horrible things to you, but you choose whether or not you're going to allow that person, who probably isn't even accurate, to define you and to make you feel bad. You don't have to do that. You can just go, okay, whatever. That person is not really accurate.
Because when you do, you're giving them control.
Yes, and power over you.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Oh, goodness. So if no one can make you feel bad, we can keep that in mind and recognize it. And then let's get biblical. We go to Matthew 18.
That's right. So let's look at a biblical model for conflict. I think we've talked about this on a lot of our shows, right? I wrote a whole book on this. So the biblical model is to go directly, notice the word directly,
First.
to a person when you have a problem. So be direct about what the problem is. If that doesn't work, you can take someone along, a third party. That approach prevents passive-aggressive people getting more aggressive with you because you have somebody there who can kind of moderate that conversation. And it's how God wants us to approach each other, open and honest and direct.
Now, let's be contextual here. This is Jesus in Matthew 18 prescribing how we should behave with one another.
Right.
And when there's a conflict and within the body of Christ, this is often contextualized. But it works in
Any
regular
type of conflict.
situations.
Right.
Yeah. So if you are the aggressive person, the passive-aggressive person, you've probably developed this habit and pattern over time. I'm hoping at some point we're going to recognize this. And if we do, as a Christian, we have to cry out to God and say, help me.
Yeah.
Help me understand what I'm doing, understand the ramifications, the ripple effects. How do I make changes? Do I need professional help, or
I think professional help helps a lot in this one, but it's really maintaining an attitude of humility. To say, I'm going to be open to what people are telling me, or I'm going to be open to the fact that I'm not really telling the truth. I'm getting to a point where I can't even recognize the truth anymore because I've bent the truth so many times. So if you can help the person see the consequences of being passive-aggressive, it could help. And I think one of the ways it helps is that the person will notice some of the time that they're being alienated from other people, and that they're not getting what they want in the long run. So they're not the person who's going to get that promotion at work, or they're not going to get people on their team. The consequences really need to be pointed out.
okay, just before we end the show, I want to know the answer to this question. Passive-aggressive. What if they get angry and aggressive?
You got to remember they will get angry, but it's really not about that. We started talking about the root of this, which is powerlessness, helplessness, fear of that conflict. So if you can focus on what's underneath that, and understand that they've learned to be, frustrated, and the way that they do that, they do this behavior as a way of trying to get a hand up on people. So if you can think of that, that helps.
Okay. Well, in the final analysis, I think I'm still wondering if people refuse any kind of intervention, and you said we can't avoid them sometimes, what's my final answer here?
Well, you can't trust them. That's the issue. So that's one of the things I'm dealing with somebody right now. I can't trust them. I don't confide in them. I don't share things with them. I don't deepen my intimacy. But remember, God can change and transform a person, and therapy can help break this behavior. So they always have a path that you can continue to give them. So the goal for all of us is to be honest in our speech, not to deceive through our words, to express our negative emotions directly so that we can work through conflicts. And remember, Christ is able to transform any behavior if we're open to change and humble ourselves. Pray for that openness and a willingness for the person to get the help they need. That's all the time we have today. Many thanks to my co-host Norm Mintle, who makes the show a conversation, and to our technical producer, Katie Sims-Wilson. From all of us here at Faith Radio, hey, we'll talk to you again next weekend. In the meantime, remember, we're doing life together, and it's better when you don't have to do it alone.
Doing life together.
Hey, thanks for listening to this conversation from the Dr. Linda Mintle Show. These conversations are available because of your support. Become a supporter now at myfaithradio.com. Please subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any episodes, and share it with friends so we can live life to the fullest, walk confidently, and find healing and hope.